Okay, hi. Welcome everybody to our community call for Open Humans. And I have hit record, so this is being recorded. And it's quite a time right now with the COVID-19 crisis. And so I wanted to suggest as an opening round, we can all briefly introduce ourselves and maybe say something about how the coronavirus crisis has been affecting us. That could be on a personal scale or on our work that we're doing. And so I'll start. Hi, I'm Mad. I co-lead Open Humans with Bastian, and the coronavirus crisis personally has been pretty tough. We're not on the front lines in my family, but me and my spouse both work, and we have 3 kids who are all at home. So that's been quite a drain on our resources and our time. So just trying to manage, but it's a tough time to be a parent right now. I just remind myself there's worse stuff out there. And with that, I will pass the ball to, I'm gonna go in order of like names on our agenda, and I'll leave Bastian for later since he's catching up. So I'm gonna pass it to James, if you'd like to say hi.
Hi, I'm James. I'm based in Highland, Scotland. Computer hacker, take a special interest in the crypto stack. In terms of COVID, my parents are both over 70, so they're to be looked after. But my mum was also a carer to a 91-year-old, so I'm now the carer for the 91-year-old, which is quite stressful. I've limited to 2 visits a week for shopping and food, but I'm going into a building of the highest risk people, and yeah, we're very sheltered. So it's like normal life in lots of ways, but yeah, that's the responsibility I now got that I didn't have previously.
Yeah, it's really tough. Best of luck. I mean, it's so stressful having older people we're caring for. I'm lucky right now that my parents are in a good situation. I think next is Ines, who might be new.
Hello, everybody. My name is Ines Potišak from Croatia. I was invited by Professor Vak. Thank you. So this is the first time that I'm joining you to see about the possibility to do some research with digital technologies in patients. I work in a university hospital center, and we are interested in innovations. Thank you.
And Kate is next.
Yes, hello everybody. My name is Kate. I'm a Quality of Life Technologies lab leader, and I have invited Ines as I was thinking we will always be welcoming support from medical experts. Myself, I'm a computer scientist, and I'm very much interested in quantified technologies. And so far, the crisis have influenced my lab. We're working on digital health technologies, but somehow everybody's losing motivation. What we are doing, does it matter? How can you help more? And I don't have small children, but I have 8 students who are really craving for attention right now. So.
And Gary, I think you're next. Thanks, Kat.
Hi, I'm Gary Wolf, and I'm experiencing the same work and family disruptions, I think, that are very, very common. So my work time, for family reasons, is limited. And then also, I was in the beginning public phase of fundraising for our new nonprofit, Article 27, whose mission includes supporting the work that Open Humans is doing and that I do in the Quantified Self community. And of course, any interest in supporting anything that isn't directly leading to positive effects in the pandemic is sort of off the table with funders. And at the same time, everybody is rushing in to redefine their projects as absolutely crucial to saving millions of lives in the next months, which actually our work is not designed to do, and doesn't seem ethical to present it that way. So it's been a very interesting struggle, and I think emerging from it, some of the work that is being done on quantified flu sort of shows some good directions. And so I'm optimistic, but it's challenging.
Next is David Blackwell.
You're muted, Dave.
Okay, there we are. David Blackwell. I'm a retired software engineer. I'm an open human. I'm in George Church's Personal Genome Project. My son and his wife both can work from home, so they're all set, although it's a crowded home because they live in a triple decker with several other roommates on their level. Two of Sharon's children are still working, and two are not. They're in construction, and that's been closed down here in Boston. And I read a paper earlier about the flu, and they described it more as a blood disorder, which would accumulate small clots in your lungs. And I'm taking something called Eliquis, which is an anticoagulant, and I'm wondering if that's possible could possibly help me from such a problem. But who knows? But nothing's changed much for me. I'm just here at home.
Thanks. And I'm noticing more and more people are joining. So I am actually going to make a decision to just call on a couple people who are familiar names that I know are doing something right now related to COVID-19 or have interests. And so, and otherwise, I apologize, but there are a lot of people joining this call. So let's try to keep things moving. And so my bad, raise your hand if you feel like you want to say something, but I'm going to start by calling on Hernan, who I know has a project related to coronavirus.
Hello everybody. My name is Hernan Morales Duran. I'm from Argentina. And the situation here is pretty uncertain about COVID-19 because we have not yet have the peaks that you are experiencing in Europe or America, but there are only like 6,200 beds with ventilators, so it's pretty few beds if the peak suddenly rises. So I'm currently developing with a group of collaborators an application for cough detection, which can use the machine learning technology or models to detect difference between and discriminate between normal cough and COVID-19 cough. So this is a project that we are currently developing, and I want to thank Sebastian here, which provided a lot of feedback, and of course you, Matt, about the project. And I hope we can release something in the next month, I hope.
Yeah, fingers crossed. And so there's some really relevant work and projects. And I know there's, I guess, two other names that I might call on. Eric Daza has tried to attend a couple times and never had a chance to say hi, and is a familiar name to me. And the other person I wanted to call out might be Ian Henderson, if you wanted to say something brief about what you're interested in. So Eric first.
Sure. So I'm Eric J. Daza. Hey, everybody. I'm here in the US in the Bay Area. And so I'm a biostatistician by training, as well as a health data scientist. My focus tends to be on N-of-1 studies and developing analysis methods for that sort of setting, using wearable data, sensor data to pull out causes and effects from just observed data. I was personally affected by COVID-19 in that I was laid off. So I'm one of the casualties of the layoff rounds. That has, however, freed me up to work on some material that I'm going to be putting online shortly, actually, sometime in the next few days on Medium, a blog post to kind of try to help out through a tutorial, all these companies and orgs who are building apps and whatnot to try to fight COVID-19 in some way. The tutorial will help you sort of take what you have done in data science. You've gotten to the point of prediction, and it'll help you take that to causal inference points where you can adjust your estimates so that it's more like a causal effect. So you can make a better recommendation to public health agencies.
And yeah, shit, I'm sorry to hear about the layoff. I know I've heard some other people, and it's it sucks right now. And Adrian, I want to note that your hand is raised, so you'll be after Ian if you want to say something. Ian first, though.
Yeah, hi folks. I am Ian Henderson. I'm based in central Scotland, only about 100 miles or so from James.
I'm supposed to move to room 225 as soon as that guy moves out. I just want to go take.
I was actually quite happily
I wasn't before, so I know it really well.
November last year, so I was in between projects. I was having a night rest when COVID.
And I've got this light that's out here in this room.
Quite early on, I'd written a blog post about what one might do about what we'll call COVID-20. Right, so essentially, I was assuming the next one, and then things started to get quite bad quite quickly, and I got a lot of. I'm quite active on the My Data community. A lot of people saying, couldn't we do some of this for COVID-19? And it was mainly to do with self-sovereign identity and the concept of a data commons, so data for the people, by the people, so to speak. So ever since I raised my hand on that one, I've been pretty full on, different hackathons, different projects, crawling all over the Quantified flu, because I think there's some real gems in there. But yeah, that's me.
Thanks, Ian. And Adrian?
Briefly, my project, which I'm going to put links in the chat in 1 second, is trying to deal with consent management and control over, there are like now hundreds of both contact tracings and symptom capture apps coming out. Most of them depend on some degree of control on the part of the individual for participation. So what my group is doing is trying to propose a self-sovereign approach that's completely, open source and standards based to help organize these things. And please, I'm going to post this in the chat, and anybody who's the least bit interested, please do contact me and talk. Thank you.
And let's have someone copy that to the notes as well, if we can, so that we all have it. Thank you. Bastian, do you want to say anything, or should I move on to or you can bring up the next question on the agenda if you'd like.
Right, the next question that actually I had was whether people are happy with the rotation that we're having right now, which is doing a community call once a month, or whether, especially now that people might have like more desire to see people, even if it's just via Zoom, we should increase it to doing it every 2 weeks maybe, or whatever other rotation people are interested in. So are there any opinions here?
Quite happy with every 2 weeks, actually. There's such a lot going on.
I think, yeah, we could even do it more often if there's interest in it. Some of it's like people are even more able to do online meetings now, it seems. How about a meeting next week? Would that be of interest?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, great. Then even more often than I just didn't want to overwhelm people by going for let's meet every week, but if people want it, then.
Yeah, if people want it. And hopefully what happens is we kind of understand if there's certain types of meetings, and so then people sort out into different meetings. If there's too many people in one meeting, we may form more specific quantified flu specific meetings, other project meetings. So here's where we are now. Let's plan on another meeting next week, and whether it's just sort of the same general format or a specific meeting will kind of evolve out of our discussions.
Can I just say, Matt, I've really, because my time is limited, I've really appreciated the Slack. And also, most people probably know, but some may not, that you can do more spontaneous meetings in Slack. So you know, that's just an option. If you want to connect with somebody, you can see if they're active in Slack and connect with them.
That's a great point. So everyone here, if there's someone, if you want to get in touch with Bastian or me in particular, or with other people here, the Slack channel is a great way to reach out to people and get their attention right away. You don't always have to bring it to a group meeting, right? So yeah, that's good to know. But I think I want to tentatively plan, say this time next week, since there are so many people here today. I don't want to just assume, like, if there's only 3 people that attend, then we'll learn that we do it more rarely. So let's plan on that. And then the next stuff on our agenda, we planned to talk a bit about quantified flu as the specific project we've been working on. Bastian and me and a lot of people here are familiar with, but we also wanted to talk about sort of general stuff in Open Humans and features and upcoming projects, trying to enable them. So I am going to switch up the order there just because I'm not sure that the Open Humans news is going to have like any specific comments. And so the Open Humans news, we've had, sparked by the Quantified Flu project, more volunteer interests and also other volunteer efforts that are interested in using Open Humans, like Ernan's cough AI. So we've been working on, there was an Apple Watch data importer that someone built using iOS app. And what we discovered is that it's harder to deploy apps in the Apple Store than one might hope for after having it rejected multiple times. This is Bastian's sort of saga that he experienced.
Yeah.
You want to say
it's like a very brief thing. I think by now it's taking us as long to deploy it in the App Store as it took this poor volunteer to actually write the application. First, it was because there was mentions of the coronavirus, which Apple does not allow if you're not a health organization. So we removed all of those and made it like a generic Open Humans data import for Apple Health. And then they were, okay, so you've fulfilled these requirements and now we have new rules, which are you can't actually deploy an application unless your website also allows sign in with Apple ID instead of just Google and Facebook. So they're shifting the goalposts one by one. I think that's the most annoying part for me, that if they give me the whole list of things we need to change in the beginning, fine, I know what to do, but doing it piecemeal by piecemeal and saying, so you've like not violated rule 3.5 any longer, now it's rule 4.4, and let's see what they come out next time with. It's a bit annoying on our end, but I hope that, let's say, maybe not by next week, but in the next 2 weeks, we will be able to get it deployed. That's my hopeful roadmap.
Yeah, fingers crossed. And that now this is blocking on me, because the main website, because we did the service of giving people Google social login and Facebook social login, we have to support Apple social login or they won't let us have an app that uses the site to log in. So rather than argue about their monopoly imposition, well, I am going to try to go ahead and add that support. And another highlight, I guess, to report, as Bastian says, that there's an Overland app for Android that is done or nearly done. And so that's GPS data. Do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, so Overland is this application for iPhones which Aaron Parecki made. I hope I got his name right. And it only exists, it sends GPS data in regular intervals to whatever server you might want to use. And we have an Open Humans integration that can store this data for you. And it's really fun. Even if GPS data these days is pretty boring because the dot is not supposed to move at all. But I got a developer for Android that worked on this for the last 3-4 weeks, and it's nearly done. So it will hit the Google Play Store hopefully next week. And then once the lockdowns are over, we can all start collecting our GPS data regardless of which phone we have.
And I think the nice thing about how this app is made is like you can decide where you want to store the data. So it's not like, so there is an offer of like using Open Humans to store the data, but if you want to set up your own server, you can do that. And so that's that. I wanted to move to Quantified Flu as a project. And I think someone should raise a hand or like self-insert right now if they want to highlight something that's not related to Quantified Flu, that's related to Open Humans. So I'll wait a second. Oh, you, Bastian.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to briefly point out, because I see Stephen said about the specific agenda, that the Keating Memorial is not forgotten. It's,
oh yeah,
I think we can at least, even if we have not sent out a message yet, it's still going on, but I think we just recognize that all of us have different things on the front of our minds these days, and we will continue it, like the calls for it and everything else, at a more appropriate time, maybe. That's the right way to phrase it. Matt, do you want to add to this?
yeah. I want to take a minute to say something about that, because the Keating Memorial was what I had planned to be spending my time on, and my time became both very limited and very taken into other projects. So Bastian and I wanted to especially recognize Stephen and that Liz Salmi had continued doing self-research, and that this is a time where people might actually be continuing self-research. And we had both planned to send an update and try to tell people, like, we don't consider this project closed. We apologize that our own attention has been distracted, and we do want it to continue. And so, yeah, I thank you for being here, Stephen Kay, and also Stephen Jonas. I'm not sure which one of you asked, but that's where it is. I think Bastian wondered whether we should extend the deadline. Our goal was to have something in Stephen Keating's memory, on the day of his passing, as an anniversary in July. But so our plan is to kind of try to reconnect on that project. Do you see anything to add to that, Bastian?
No, I think if we actually end up doing the calls once a week, we might actually be able to set one call a month aside for actually talking about this and continuing the work there. If we meet more regularly, in any case, I think that might be a good way forward.
How do the Stevens feel about this? Thumbs up, down, because like these.
No, that totally makes sense. And I mean, the same things happen to me. I've continued to take all the measurements for my research, but my data analysis has slowed massively. I'm also working on a COVID-related project, and that's basically caused me to have effectively 2 jobs for the moment, plus handling all the shelter-in-place stuff. So totally makes sense. What I was suggesting just in the comments was, if we had specific agendas for the call, if we're doing it every week, my guess is most people won't be able to make every one, and then they can decide based on the agenda which ones to jump in on.
Let's plan on doing that. Maybe not next week, but let's plan on making one of these specific to the self-research.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah, just along the same lines. I've continued my project. Because of limited bandwidth, I haven't been like posting like a project log, but like the project is still going on. I've even expanded it. I've like roped in my brother into doing measurements with me. So it's really interesting stuff. And I'm kind of annoyed that I haven't had the bandwidth to share it. And so a few days ago, I had a similar idea where it's like, yeah, we should probably just have like for people who are participating in that project, just a weekly meeting, just come in, share only like 30 minutes or something like that. Share what's going on, what you're learning. It doesn't have to be very formal, just to kind of have that connection and maybe spark some new ideas that you can take into the next week of measurement. I think would be helpful and not too much of a burden on people.
That sounds good.
I'd be
happy
really
to.
enjoy that.
I'd be happy to do that. And I could do this on Thursdays. Those are my only 2 days every week, is Tuesdays and Thursdays. But if this time on Thursdays works for you, I'm happy to do that.
Mm-hmm. That'd be great.
Does that sound good to you? Does Thursday work? Okay.
Yeah.
So Bastian's cringing at all the meetings I'm signing myself up for, but you don't have to attend. So we'll plan on 2 more meetings next week. Tuesday and Thursday. Great. And so on to quantified flu. To frame the discussion with quantified flu, I think it's very important to say that quantified flu is not attempting to do epidemiology in the sense that it's going to survey a whole bunch, like a very large number of people, especially not like geographic epidemiology, but like let's recognize that there's epidemiologists who have epidemiology work. What quantified flu is trying to do is to understand whether we can take individual data and discover individual value. And this may have some larger learnings that might be described as epidemiological. I don't know. like Eric may have opinions on this, on the language here, but I do think this framing here is important, because I don't want us to start sort of imagining that we need like 1,000 people to do stuff when we can learn so much from individuals who decide to do self-tracking and have their own data. And so with that, we've been working on improvements on the site and recently deployed one which adds to the symptoms. There's a daily symptom self-tracking. And I'm not sure how many people are active, but I would say at least 30 right now are doing it, because I just deployed an update for opting in to share your self-tracking logs, and that's how many people seem to have gone ahead and clicked the button and are self-sharing their self-tracking logs. And one of them I noticed thinks they got coronavirus, and these are with random IDs, so I don't actually know who that is, but our hope now is, now that we have started building up these logs of symptom self-tracking, and there are people with wearable data, one to do that Bastian said he's going to do Thursdays, to get that wearable data connected to the symptom logs, so that maybe we can make visualizations out of it ongoing. I have some bug fixes with the symptom. I know that it doesn't work very well on touch screen. I discovered that after it was just deployed. But if there's any sort of wish list or needs of like, what makes this usable, or what would like what would you like to learn from your own data? What would you like to be tracking? I wanted to kind of open up the floor on sort of feature requests and bug reports on what you'd like to see in Quantified Flow. And if nobody says anything, I'm going to call on somebody. I know it's a big audience. Has anybody? Oh, go ahead.
Can you say what's questions right now? What are the questions right now? I'm sorry, I really did not follow.
So maybe my question here should be, who here is doing this daily check-ins or the symptom reports? Like, do you know what I'm like talking about? I'm doing it. Okay, and so that is sort of the user experience, I think, that is important to make valuable. If there's any value in doing this sort of symptom self-tracking, to understand if it's working for people, if it's the right set of symptoms, or I think, Gary, you had an idea regarding customization. Maybe I'll let you speak a little about value of these self-tracking things, if you have any thoughts.
Well, you know, we were talking sort of about your ideas for a roadmap for developing symptom tracking as a generic resource. And I think that makes a lot of sense. As a user, though, I'll just, you know, sometimes we have ideas about what should be done, but then as a user, we find our own behavior doesn't match. And so I'll just say that the most useful thing about the symptom tracking is that it's a one-click report. And I know that I've been successful using it because it's a one-click report. And that probably if it required even any more thinking, I would put it off. And because it's a daily pattern where really you get the benefit from doing it every day, putting it off ruins it. So I guess even though as kind of somebody interested in generic resources, I have a lot of ideas and they're pretty closely aligned to stuff you've been talking about. As a user, I'll just try to be very honest and say, I think anything that complicates, like this symptoms, no symptoms, click, done, is probably, well, has a high cost. So you want to be sure it's worth it.
So let's be sure to retain that, like, no symptoms, one click, and you're done. Yeah. I've been reporting a lot of no symptoms myself.
Yeah,
I was wondering. Okay, just quickly for Gary, I'm wondering, do you think it's also because the number of times you press no symptoms is comparatively high, that you rarely have to press the other button? Because once you want to report any symptoms, it does become so much more work, right? Because you have to like click all the buttons again. It turns from a one click to like lots of different clicks solution once you actually have any symptoms. Do you think this is problematic as well? Or do you think it's okay because it rarely happens during day-to-day life, hopefully at least?
Okay, so I'll tell you, but I speculate because I haven't clicked that other. But I am tracking some other symptoms using, you know, what some people recognize as this one button. Okay, so this also has the advantage, and I'm tracking complicated symptoms using this, and it's working. So I'm tracking incidence of my cardiac arrhythmia, and I'm also using a different one button to track my essential tremor. And the cardiac arrhythmia is complicated to track, you know. However, it's reduced to a simple button. Now, that only works because I had a preparation phase in which I did a lot of sort of thinking about what is it that it feels like to track this arrhythmia? When do I want to press the button? And that preparation phase was kind of time consuming. So I think the solution is not necessarily in the interface of the click around symptoms, but in somehow a learning process of, and there, I mean, it's kind of a deep question, but I think in terms of the interface, I saw that Mad was thinking about intensity, like a 0 to 5 scale. And I think that's a very good idea, but just to say even right in that idea, I think is a lot of complexity for people mentally. So it's almost like if the only criteria were symptoms, like general, are you feeling sick? 0 to 5, I think that would be a major step forward even without any classification of the symptoms. And so just to be kind of honest with ourselves about the slope, the complexity slope being very steep at the beginning.
It's as if you want to kind of front load the most easy one question first, and then if they don't want to report anything else, that's still very informative. And then if you want to add specifics.
Right, because I don't want to take us too far down this rabbit hole, but it turns out what we've seen again and again is a failure mode in people self-tracking is when the system they're using to track sort of diverges from their underlying sense of what's really going on. It doesn't quite match. You know, and then this just becomes like basically an exit door from the whole process that is hard to recover from. So as soon as you start articulating even something that seems as transparent as headache, if we think about some of the reporting that Jacob Egg Larson did on his headache tracking project, it turns out it took him a lot of time to really get with that project because when does the headache start? Is it really a headache? These are deeper than they seem. So again, you can get there for sure, but just to be clear about how much work it is, even in the seemingly obvious.
I think it's also important to limit scope and understand that this is sort of a daily check-in type format. And so it's not hitting a button whenever you want to sort of format, but like we're feeling sufficiently motivated that you're going to go do one thing, like, and that might just be the one button if I'm feeling good. But I think that I really like this idea of sort of stepwise capture, or just understanding, like, if you just answered one more question of, are you feeling sick, intensity scale, and then just capture that, and don't worry about like having to answer 12 different types of sick, that might decrease. I think I haven't done this while sick, right? And so some of this is like, what is the user experience when sick? Maybe when I'm sick, I'm going to be motivated enough to whine about it that I'll be like, oh, let me log everything that's annoying me, and I'll be happy to do that. Has anyone used this while sick and like felt sort of like, do you have any thoughts on that? On like whether you want to log every detail, or you just want to be like, I feel sick, I'm done.
Mads, I used I think it's the MIT one, self-reporting. Mm-hmm. So I had some initial setup, and then it just says to me, are you feeling okay today? And it's always like, no. But doing my quantified, self hay fever experiment. Now this is a very challenging, confusing time because my system's definitely kicked in like about 10 days ago. So I'm always saying, is it the hay fever I'm reporting? In the COVID one, I definitely don't think I've got COVID, right? But it's not that, you know, as Gary says, you start going down that route. So in my own log before the memorial, you know, it's definitely feature creep. Now includes headaches and stuff. So I agree, you got to keep it simple, but I don't know how you get any meaningful answers from just that one click.
Yeah, I've got a number of thoughts on certainly how it might evolve from my perspective. So the first one is about analytics and visualization. So it's nice to see both my own data, right, over time in some fancy graphs and charts. And from my perspective, the more data, the better, right? Whether more data points on wellness or more data points on illness. Because the benefit of Open Humans to me is that it's open, right? And it feels more like my data, right, for my purposes. I mean, I've been tracking stuff all the way right back since the quantified self first emerged, but I still don't feel that Apple Health or Fitbit or any of that stuff is mine. And as Gary says, you tend to diverge from these tools because you lose confidence and they lose relevance. So point one would be analytics and visualization. I'm also interested in how I can contribute my data, not just anonymously, right, at a more granular level, potentially name, but more likely just local area. Right? So the way I explain this in my data project is that, you know, I live in a big out-of-town housing estate, you know, 3,500 houses, 10,000 people. We all know each other. We all know who's got it, who thinks they've got it, who's suffering, who needs what kind of help. So at that level, it doesn't really have to be that anonymous. Right? So that's another angle as to how one might pass richer data on in a controlled fashion to somebody who was going to look after it and do something useful with it. The other thing that occurs is test data. Right? So what's inevitably going to come up in COVID-19 is I've had a test, right, and my test confirms. Right, and there's a ton of work being done in the SSI community as to how that's going to work, you know, with or without SSI. So that might be something to look into over time.
Yeah, related to your first point about the fancy data visualizations, what kinds of visualizations would people here think are interesting or useful? Because like the only visualization that currently exists on Quantified Flu is the one I made because I was interested in, but this might not be the ones that you find interesting or useful for your own visualization needs or understanding needs. So I would be interested if anyone has opinions on this. But before this, I want to point out Stephen Jonas was asking what SSI stands for. Ian, can you quickly?
Self-sovereign identity. So essentially it's the W3C standard for how I can bring my own identity to the party. I mean, there's one visualization that occurs to me, and if you essentially think of all the top-down data that we see on the news day in, day out is aggregated, but it's heavily skewed towards the right-hand side, essentially the critical and the fatality data, whereas data on the left-hand side, you know, the people who are only just symptomatic. There's very little knowledge on how long does it take to go from first symptom to feeling right again. You know, is it on average 5 days, 7 days, 14 days? Anything on that front would be useful, I think.
I think that's one of the real potentials we have with this project. There is one person who has logged at this point that they may have had COVID-19. I can put the link there because it's one of these public logs. If we have the notes document, where are we? We're not really making notes, are we? Should I share it in the chat? I will share it in the chat here. So I'm going to share two links. One is to the person's log, and one is to the JSON data that is behind that. We are making that JSON data available so that if anybody does want to contribute visualizations of these data, it's there available for them to use, to download and use. And it is really interesting to look at this, especially if you look at the JSON, which is really kind of annoying to look at. It does have notes. And this person thought at first they had a common cold. And then in a later report suspected that it was COVID-19 and received negative test results. So had a maybe a false negative, or maybe it wasn't COVID-19. So this is sort of the N of one experience of an individual going through the process of getting sick, getting sicker, developing a fever, and you can see that all happening. And I think it's really interesting. And I'd love to see sort of us do a better job of visualizing the information that's in the JSON, and also maybe associate wearable data if someone has it. And that narrative of like, I thought I had a cold, and then I got a fever, and then I felt like this is how I felt after 5 days and 10 days. And we can all learn. I can learn. I think we can all learn for what other people are experiencing. I think that would be really valuable. Is anyone else looking at it? I don't know if you can find the link, but
yeah, it's good.
I want to add something quickly too to Mad's point, just to underline it really quick. But yeah, it is important to figure out your own pattern of, when am I prone to reporting something or recording something versus not? Because, it's like if you're not recording anything, the opposite of what Mad's doing, right? When you're sick, then all of those points are going to be like lower or higher than the rest of the points, but you won't see it. Then you might accidentally think, oh, everything is low, when really, in fact, it's like high when you're not reporting it. So just to highlight that.
And somewhat related to this, I have a question for you, Eric. At a different call, I think last week, we were wondering about the question whether you should, if you make these symptom reports now, not binary, but give them like a range of classifications, should you tell people what they answered the day before or not? Like, so do you give them like the reference point of yesterday you felt a 3 out of 5, and now today we ask you again, or do you keep it hidden that these measures are independent? It's a tricky question, because like on the one hand, you want them to somehow scale it according to how they felt yesterday in comparison. At the same time, this means that you might just regress to the mean somehow. So do you have any insight from like a more sciencey point of view, maybe?
Well, I mean, yeah, that's an interesting question. I think it depends. Like if you want to do that and then say, do it maybe every week and say, okay, in the last week, here was your score, and can you relate, can you now at every day this week, can you relate it to that? Then that's fine. But I mean, yeah, it's not really a clear-cut answer. If you want them to be more independent measurements, then you don't sort of prime a person like that. But if the point is, no, we want you to give us a rating that is relative to your baseline from yesterday or whenever it is, then that also makes sense. So I think it depends on what your goal is. Is it more relative, or is it more of an absolute scale? So I'm sorry I missed that discussion last week, but yeah, you can send me something offline if you want to.
I think this was just private to us, so.
Oh. Yeah, no, this was, yeah.
Yeah, and I had forgotten, but this was also to try to get to Gary's sort of usability point of if we preload it with your previous answers, then it becomes easier to kind of update it with your current status. Based on Eric's response, it feels to me like it is good to preload it, because we're interested on that individual timeline progress. We're not trying to get randomized samples across people, but like the individual sort of record of an experience.
Yeah, but I guess at the same time, you might destroy this record of the experience if you tell them how they felt yesterday, but not correctly remember how they were feeling in comparison, right? You might still end up with the same effect of driving them to the middle of the road, kind of, by...
Allow me to break into this.
And Stephen Jonas also has his hand raised. But go ahead, Adrian, yeah.
The thing that I think would be extremely useful is if we could get people to link their initial symptom, to a test that they subsequently got in the next month or couple of weeks. And so what I'm saying is, from the perspective of interpreting immunity, which is my focus, not the tests themselves or the symptoms themselves, but how does, say, a doctor interpret immunity for that patient, which is my focus. The information that we might be gathering that's really not coming from anywhere else is the kind of thing that would link the symptoms to the eventual COVID test. And so what I'm saying is, if I had to design this site, number one, I would split people into two categories right up front. Are you willing to be contacted by us again, or to sign in some way so that we have a thread, or are you just not, and you're just reporting a symptom one time? Because that's a branch point, and I don't know if our intent is to allow both or to only talk to people that are willing to be contacted again, but we should get that up front, because otherwise I've gone to a couple of these symptom reporting sites, in the UK and here from Harvard, and they don't make that clear, and it's very disorienting. And then the second thing is, if we could figure out some way of contacting the person back once a week and asking them, did you have a test? And what was the result? And what was the test? Or because there's going to be all this serology coming down, and we know that it's all going to be bad. It's not going to be any better than it is for the flu today. And so I don't know, this may be technically too complicated, but if we could associate these two things amongst at least the people that are inclined to volunteer to do this, like us, it would be a big thing, bigger than us trying to interpret the timetable of symptoms, which was going to be difficult for us as non-clinicians, and it's going to be a moving target, and I'm not exactly sure how we would use it. In any case, it's just got too much dimensionality and too many questions. But trying to gauge the relationship between the first symptom and the test, that we can do.
So one feature that I had kind of planned and is commented out in the code right now was the ability to report a diagnostic test. I'm not sure to what extent we should lean too much on this as a really important source of data, in the sense that we're going to create major sort of collective knowledge. Remember, this is much more focused on the N of 1 stuff, but when it does come to an individual reporting on, like, I got tested, I had a negative result, I have a positive result, it is really nice to have that ability to kind of put that in your log of, like, by the way, a week later, I got my test results back. And I think that would answer this without us having to sort of follow up with them. Since if you're doing self-tracking anyway, like, you're receiving our emails, and you can add this if it's there. But I also just wanted to emphasize that this is not like a large-scale epidemiology project that's going to try to connect test results to, like, all other things that are possible out there. And with that, I'll move to Stephen Jonas, has his hand raised. You're muted.
Yeah, I was trying to turn it off. Yeah, I tried to use the spacebar thing, but it wasn't working. So just on we were talking about earlier about just using the, like, sliders, 0 to 5 rating. Just a point on that. So Alan Neuringer is professor at Reed College here in Portland, Oregon. He's been advocating the use of self-experimentation and research since the early 80s. So he's thought a really long time about this. And I was sharing a project where I was listening to music albums, and they were, like, scheduled for me. I'd force myself to listen to an album, and I'd rate it on a 1 to 10 scale. And I talked about how you'd have this period of, like, trying to figure out, like, what the numbers mean, like corresponding how I feel to, like, the number 7, like, what is the number 7 album? And actually how, like, this, 1, it takes time, and 2, it sort of evolves over time, and how that's adds difficulty to the sort of analysis. And Alan brought up the suggestion of not worrying about the absolute value of like what a 7 is, but like when I record something, put what the last album was and how I measured it, or what was the score I gave it. And so it sounded like it was part of the sort of evolving sort of process. Honestly, I do not fully remember all of his reasons for it. I'm kind of taking it as like the sort of like sage advice, but there seems to be something there with using previous ratings as a sort of like baseline or a way to judge like the rating you're about to give. So.
It sounds like a cautious vote in favor of providing those previous ratings.
Also sounds like I need to follow up with Alan and get him to write out exactly his reasoning for it and share it with everyone. So I'll give myself that to do.
That'd be great.
And Liuba, I think, accidentally wrote to me saying that it would be good to give the possibility to self-report for other days. So I think this is about if you missed reporting one day or have maybe historic data where you have, for whatever reason, a diary already, maybe, I don't know. But how do people feel about this?
And editing past days, I guess.
I guess that.
Should you be able to edit a past day? I think this implies that.
I think it's great to be able to edit past days. And the reason is, having used a lot of different self-tracking apps, is I think it's going to be an extremely rarely used feature. However, it is very reassuring. And so it's really there to allow you to not worry about making mistakes.
I'd say as long as it's tracked too. Like we know if you edited past dates for analytic purposes.
Who's we? I mean, we inclusive of the user, I guess.
Yeah, but as long as there's a record, because the thing is, like from an analytic standpoint, I can't necessarily see if I'm analyzing my own data if I didn't write it down. Like, oh yeah, I changed this value like 5 times, but most of them I didn't, and that'll have an impact on the sorts of things you pull out of it, conclusions you pull out of it. So, at least just off the top of my head, that's what I think.
Every time this comes up, there's also attention around privacy. The concern of like you recorded something and you don't want anyone else to know that you made that mistake or included that piece of information versus sort of the data integrity. I know that our forums, for example, if there's edits, there's logs kept of all the edits that people have made. And so the option to delete a data point is probably, it could be a combination of record every edit made, but also have the option to delete it if you just don't want that shared. Does that sound right?
What about a window of a week to edit and unrestricted delete?
I'm not sure we need to limit editing.
The only thing when I was doing, I don't remember what app I was using, but I noticed that I would occasionally finger fub something and edit something that was a month ago, and I didn't mean to, and I couldn't remember what the previous data was. That's the only thing I'm thinking of.
Yeah, I think like for the edits, I think we don't need to know what the past versions were, just that how many edits were made, right? I think like the same way as Slack does it. You don't see what the original message was, you just see someone made an edit. It's like a pointer that, watch out, this might be different from what it was in the past.
Is that
even
fair,
if there's no way?
Would that be okay, Eric? Or is that bad?
Could you repeat that again? So it's just an indicator that there was an edit made, or?
Yeah, right. Just say that it was edited or how many times, but you don't keep track of what the edits exactly were. You just know that this number was changed 5 times. You might know that either you take it with a grain of salt or it's very accurate depending on why you think this number was changed so often.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a good sort of balance in that tension, because at least there's some information to say, okay, this point was changed a few times, like, but we don't necessarily know to what, but it's useful just to even know that. So Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we could keep like kind of a time-stamped edited on these days, and that's all we need to know is like when it was edited, or maybe the most recent one. Okay. I love the feature ideas that are coming out of conversation. Any other ones lurking out there?
One thing I was going to ask on Slack, I know you get it from Fitbit, but it might be interesting to add the Withings API to Quantified Flu so that you can get things like weight over time. That might be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, implicitly, Open Humans already does support Withings, I'm pretty sure, unless the integration broke in the last few weeks. But otherwise, we already have this data. It just needs to be pulled into Quantified Flu. I think that's a matter of someone doing this, and I haven't done it so far because I don't have any Withings devices. I think that's the main reason why there is no support, but there is a Fitbit and Oura Ring integration.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much incentive because I have the Withings data, but I haven't gotten sick, so I have like my weight's just been slowly creeping up, as with many of us stuck at home. So our hour is almost done, and maybe it'd be nice to do a closing round instead of everyone just having to wave goodbye at the last minute. So as a closing round, maybe what we look forward to in the coming weeks. And so I'll pass this off to Bastian.
Well, I'm really happy that we decided to meet more often. I think it's really nice to have these, and I'm happy we get to do it more often than just once a month. And who's next on the list, Matt? I don't have the document.
I could go in order, but I guess Jane. Well, let's go in reverse order. So Ben, you're at the end of our participant list. So
sorry I was late. I really like coming to these. Sometimes I get trapped with real work, and I'm be happy to contribute. I'm looking forward to joining you guys for the rest of this endeavor.
And there are some new participants that we didn't get a chance to say hi to. So I'll say hi to Constantine if you want to say hi, or Robert Sloan. And Cheng Lu. Hi.
Hi. Yes. Sorry, it's my first time joining this Slack meeting, and hi. Yeah, I think the Open Humans has a very good idea, and I just opened the Slack and it pops up, and I enjoyed it. Thank you. Yeah, I'm a big user. I'm not a big user. I like the open snip and open projects, like the idea of, because we can't actually protect our data, and so let's just share it and find what we can learn from it. So I'm just here to learn, and yeah, I'll try the app. Yeah.
It's great to have you here. It's great to see new faces. I think Donnie is a new name as well. I want to say hi. And with that, I think the one person I hadn't called on in the opening round was Stephen Jonas. And so if you'd like to say hi, and Robin, you're a new face too, and I'm going to add your name. So maybe I'll call on Robin first. Robin, it's great to have you here.
Hello, it's great to be here. I'm more of a user. I have been collecting data on myself for decades, and it's like, what can I do with it? The spreadsheet gets bigger and bigger, 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 bigger. Now it's like half of me hopes I get sick because will this data that I have, will it have predicted that? And then I own a manufacturing business that's critical. So I have 60 families, and we're trying to keep everybody healthy and working. And we've had our first positive of a spouse who's also the daycare provider for like my #1 producer. So there's just all these things. And I'm just curious. Can the data predict any of this? Could it, would it? I'd love to put an Apple Watch on all my guys But you can't do that. Or actually, I would put a Garmin on all of them, but my insurance company would not agree. It's amazingly interesting and fascinating.
Yeah, and there's only so much we can do in this time where we can't go out and get all the devices right away. But that's do you think much about the self-tracking of like just doing that alone, or do you feel like device data is needed?
I almost feel like I do a lot of training. So for me, the HRV, some of the readiness numbers that I get from Training Peaks, that advises or informs what I may do next week. And especially now, if I see my numbers deteriorating in light of, I can't get sick right now, or if I do, I need to know. The sooner I know, and I don't even know what can you do about it. If you're gonna get sick, are you just gonna get sick? I don't even know, and nobody seems to know. But yeah, the device data, I think, is important. And I've added, temperature data, and I finally ordered an Oura ring today because I'm sick and tired of having to enter my temperature AM and PM. And I'm also have been able to solve my pre-diabetes, with continuous glucose monitoring. So that's been and that's a device. So yeah, talk to my, the insurance companies don't care. I have all this data. It's just so fascinating. And part of me wants to get sick because I want to see what that looks like, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
But then I don't.
Of course you don't.
Yeah, you say that now.
I know. And my significant other had triple bypass last October. Now, I keep a Garmin device on him, but not as sophisticated a one, which, believe me, he got the day he got out of the hospital. Because what would I have seen? What would I have, So that's been kind of fun, too, because now I have another data set to kind of look at. And I wish I had 2 or 3 or 4 more. It's just fascinating. But from a back end, like all you people writing this software, I'm mind blown, just blown.
It's super wonderful to have you here because it's like people using the data and finding real value in it is what makes it important. I mean, if that's not there, the data is meaningless. And I should add that Bastian started looking into getting Garmin support, which was less than entirely pleasant, but it looks like it might get somewhere.
Good.
Yeah, I hope in the next few weeks that's next to getting the Apple Watch supported as Garmin devices.
Oh, never mind the Apple Watch. That's the stupidest device ever made, I think. I had to use one because the insurance company, I wanted to test it, but it sucks. Garmin's way better. You get better data.
So it's wonderful to meet you, Robin. And hopefully I'll get to see you again and see others here. With that, I think I'd better wrap up the meeting since we're 5 minutes over and it's been super wonderful. So I guess our plan is to try this rather ambitiously next week to do an open meeting on Tuesday and then a specific maybe half hour for self-researchers who are doing self-research projects. And so that's our plan for next week. Yeah, thanks everyone.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Great to see everyone.
Bye everyone.
Bye.